The main course had just arrived at Kingfisher Row when she, my father's new wife, punched me straight in the cheekbone, right under the ceiling camera's red eye. I wiped the blood, lightly touching my recording watch. 8:19 p.m. Thank you for the timestamp. They thought I'd be silent. They didn't know I'm the one who writes the rules that force people above the law to bow. My name is Mara Quinn. I am 32 years old, and I am an expert in the architecture of consequences. The restaurant, Kingfisher Row, was Helene's choice. It was always her choice. Here in the insulated affluence of Briar Hollow, it was the apex predator of fine dining, a place built of dark wood, old money, and reflective glass. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine, ensuring that diners were not just eating, but performing for an audience of their own reflections. The lighting was meticulously curated, a low yellow amber that was meant to feel intimate but only felt isolating, turning every table into a separate, judgmental stage. And above us, nestled in the geometric coffered ceiling, was the camera, a small, black dome, its tiny indicator light, a pinprick of arterial red, blinked with a steady metronomic pulse. Once every 3 seconds, blink, 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 a silent, digital heartbeat I had been watching since we sat down. I was seated in the middle, a tactical disadvantage I had protested and lost. My father, Arthur Quinn, sat to my right, his gaze already distant, retreating into the abstract comfort of his wineglass. To my left sat Helene Ward, his wife of 3 years. She was the Director of Community and Donor Relations at Evermere University. I am the Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer at that same university. This was not a dinner, it was a jurisdiction hearing. The main course had just been placed, a delicate arrangement of seared scallops for Helene, a bloody steak for my father, and a simple root vegetable tart for me. The air was thick with the things we were not saying, a silence punctuated only by the heavy, expensive scrape of silver on porcelain. I do hope, Helene began, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, that you're finding fulfillment in that little office of yours. Mara. I didn't look up from my plate. My job is fulfilling. Helene. Oh, I'm sure, she said, her voice a saccharine drawl that always preceded an attack. All those files, all that reading, it seems so dreadfully isolating, just useless paperwork, isn't it? Ticking boxes while the real work, the relationship work, gets done by people who actually engage with the world. My father shifted, a sign of his discomfort, but he said nothing. He never said anything. I placed my fork down, aligning it perfectly with my knife. Compliance isn't paperwork. Helene, it's the scaffolding that keeps the entire institution from collapsing under the weight of people who think relationships put them above the rules. Her smile, usually her most potent weapon, faltered. The amber light caught the hard, new tightness in her jaw. She had expected me to shrink, to apologize for my useless job. I had just, in her language, questioned her entire career. You, she hissed, leaning in, the smell of her floral perfume and white wine washing over me, are a bitter little bureaucrat. You've always been jealous. I'm just thorough, I said, my voice quiet, even. And that, apparently, was the final trespass. It wasn't a slap. It was a punch, a closed fist, calculated strike that connected with the sharp bone of my left cheek, just below the eye. Her rings, large and ostentatious, bit into my skin. The sound of the restaurant evaporated. It was as if someone had hit a universal mute button, the clink of a wineglass being set down, mid-motion, the low murmur of the couple at table 12, the scrape of a chair 3 tables over. It all stopped. A young waiter, his name tag reading Leo, froze mid-stride, a heavy silver pepper grinder clutched in his right hand. His gaze locked on the drop of blood welling on my skin, his mouth parting slightly. This was the cinematic moment, the freeze frame where everything changes. But my heart didn't leap. It didn't even stumble. As the hot metallic sting of pain radiated across my face, as I tasted the salt and copper of blood on my tongue where the inside of my cheek had split against my teeth. My mind was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. I counted 3, 2, 1. This was the moment of activation. I didn't flinch away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I slowly, deliberately, tilted my head to the right. It was a small, calculated movement, just enough to angle the fresh, blossoming bruise and the single, perfect track of blood directly into the line of sight of the black dome camera in the ceiling. The red light blinked. A silent confirmation. Witnessed. My left hand was resting on the table, next to my water glass. My smartwatch was dark. I pressed my thumb against the bezel, activating the audio log. I whispered, my voice barely audible above the sudden, suffocating silence of the room. 8:19 p.m., table 14, north-facing camera. I paused, letting my own voice imprint the timestamp. Assault documented. Then, under the heavy linen tablecloth, my right hand unlocked my phone. I opened an app, a proprietary investigation management platform our office uses. I hit the flag location button. A blue dot appeared over a map of Briar Hollow, instantly geotagging my current location and cross-referencing my calendar entry for dinner with Father Helene. This location tag automatically created a new entry in my secure cloud, time-stamped to the microsecond, and began syncing data. It was prepared to receive the video file. I knew the system architecture because, as a courtesy to local businesses frequented by the university, I had advised Kingfisher Row on their security and data integrity package 2 years prior. I advised them on chain of custody protocols for their footage, ensuring it was admissible and easily retrievable. I had helped build this trap. "You bitch," Helene hissed, her voice a low, vicious tremor. She had realized, too late, what the camera meant. She grabbed my wrist across the table, her grip like steel. "You touch my reputation at Evermere, and I will end you. You think your little files can protect you?" I let her hold my wrist. I stared at her hand, then slowly lifted my gaze to meet her eyes. They were wide. The pupils dilated with a mixture of rage and a sudden, creeping panic. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, and I felt the skin split further over my cheekbone. "You work at my school." "Helene," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "You're the director of community relations, and you seem to have forgotten the faculty handbook's policy on domestic violence. You seem to have forgotten the state statutes on assault and battery in a public place. You seem to have forgotten the morals clause in your own employment contract." I looked at my father. His face was gray, his eyes pleading. "Mara, my God, don't make a scene." The words hit me, but they didn't hurt. They were just predictable data points. He was not protecting me. He was protecting the evening. He was protecting the illusion. I gently, firmly, pulled my wrist from Helene's grasp. "I'm not making a scene, Dad," I replied, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet room. "I'm making a record." I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped loudly on the hardwood floor. A sound that made my father wince. I stood up, taking my linen napkin and pressing it lightly to my cheek. When I pulled it away, it was stained crimson. I folded it neatly and placed it on the table. Evidence. Helene was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked like a cornered animal, all pretense of sophistication gone, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. I looked at the waiter, Leo, who was still frozen by the service station. "My compliments to the chef," I said, my voice steady. "The tart was excellent. Please bring the check for our table. I'll be paying." I took my credit card from my wallet and placed it on the table. My father just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, words failing him for the first time in his life. The waiter, startled into motion, hurried over. He took the card, his eyes darting from my face to Helene and back. I waited. The entire restaurant waited. The only sound was the distant clatter of pans from the kitchen and the insistent, steady blink of the red camera light. He returned in under a minute, the small black folder in his trembling hand. "Ma'am, Are you okay? Should I call someone? I am fine. Thank you. Leo, I said. I took the receipt. I signed my name, and then I retrieved the most important part, the customer copy. I didn't walk away immediately. I stood there and folded the receipt twice, smoothing the crease. I looked at the bottom of the thin paper. There it was, exactly as I knew it would be, a small QR code. Next to it, the text read, "For billing inquiries or to request security footage of your visit, please scan here." It was the final piece of the chain, the public-facing, legally compliant access point to the digital witness. I had the internal flag from my app, the audio log from my watch, the physical evidence on the napkin, the visual evidence of my injury, a room full of witnesses, and now, the key to the video. I put the receipt in my pocket. "The gala is tomorrow. Helene," I said softly. "You have a big day. You should get some rest." I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I didn't run. I walked calmly through the maze of silent, staring tables, my head held high, letting the amber light illuminate the damage she had done. The cold night air of Briar Hollow hit my face as the doors closed behind me, and the pain, hot and sharp, finally began to register. I welcomed it. It was fuel. It was focus. It was the stamp on the file. I walked the 4 blocks back to my apartment in the cold, sharp air of the Briar Hollow evening. The streets were quiet, swept clean by the same privileged tidiness that defined Kingfisher Row. The only sound was the precise, rhythmic click of my own heels on the brick sidewalk. Each step was a measurement of time, moving me further from the scene and closer to the execution. The pain in my cheek had subsided from a hot sting to a deep, resonant throb. It was a physical anchor, a reminder. It was the data point I hadn't known I needed, but the one she had foolishly provided. This was never just about a family dinner, it was about jurisdiction. And Helene Ward had just, with her own manicured fist, crossed the border from her territory into mine. On paper, our roles at Evermere University were supposed to be symbiotic. She was the Director of Community and Donor Relations. I am the Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer. She built the relationships. I ensured those relationships were legal, ethical, and aligned with university policy. She was the face, the smile, the warm handshake securing million-dollar donations for new auditoriums and endowed chairs. I was the anonymous function, the firewall, the person in a windowless office who reviewed the gift agreements, audited the expense reports, and investigated the anonymous hotline tips. My father, Dr. Arthur Quinn, a man whose academic brilliance in 18th century history was matched only by his profound emotional cowardice, saw our roles as a simple binary. Helene, his wife, was a connector. She was dynamic, intuitive, a master of human relationships. I, his daughter, was the girl who reads laws. I was rigid, analytical, a purveyor of no. He praised her for making things happen and criticized me for getting in the way. He couldn't understand, or refused to understand, that her connections were potential liabilities and my paperwork was the only thing protecting the university's 200-year-old reputation and its nonprofit status. From the day they married, 3 years ago. Helene's primary project was the systematic and quiet isolation of me from my father. It was a masterpiece of soft power. It wasn't a single, dramatic exclusion. It was a slow, suffocating drift, engineered entirely by her. It was the sudden, intimate donor dinners at their house, the ones I only learned about later, when I saw the glossy photos on her meticulously curated Instagram feed. The captions were always the same. Such a wonderful evening with the Evermere family. So blessed to be building the future with these amazing partners. She tagged the donors, the university president, the dean of the business school. I was never mentioned. I was the inconvenient appendage from a previous life, the daughter who didn't fit the new brand. She'd leverage my own job against me. "Oh, Arthur, I didn't even think to invite Mara," she'd say, her voice dripping with counterfeit concern, usually in front of him. I know how she hates these schmoozing events. She's so pure, so above it all. I wouldn't want to make her uncomfortable. And my father, desperate for his new, shiny life to remain uncomplicated, would just nod. You're right, dear. Mara doesn't have time for that sort of thing. Tonight's dinner at Kingfisher Row was the culmination of this strategy. Helene had billed it as a long overdue reconciliation. The real reason was that 4 days ago, I had sent her a formal, flagged and logged email from my office. It was a polite but firm notification of a potential conflict of interest regarding a new community vendor she was pushing, one that seemed to have an undisclosed financial relationship with a member of her own fundraising team. It was a clear violation of our procurement policy. She didn't respond for 72 hours. Then, yesterday, a calendar invite appeared. Family dinner. My father called me 2 minutes later. Mara, please, he'd said, his voice already tired. Helene is trying. Just come. No work talk. Let's just be a family. Family was Helene's most cherished and weaponized word. She loved to talk about the Evermere family and our Quinn family. Family over everything, she'd toast, raising a glass of champagne at a gala. But for her, family was just a stage for public relations. Every meal was a performance. Every holiday was a photo opportunity. Every interaction was a transaction, measured in perceived loyalty and social capital. I had learned, long before she arrived, how to survive in this environment. I learned to be silent. My father interpreted my silence as sullen acquiescence. Helene interpreted it as weakness, as proof that I was the cowed, bitter girl who reads laws. They were both catastrophically wrong. My silence was not passive. It was active. It was tactical. I learned to be silent to listen. I listened to the casual boasts she made at holiday parties, the names she dropped, the subtle ways she'd claim credit for a grant my department had secured. I learned to be silent to observe. I watched how she manipulated my father, how she charmed the trustees, and most importantly, how she treated the catering staff, her assistants, and the junior faculty, the people she believed were invisible. And I learned to be silent to record, to document, to build the file. Every passive-aggressive email, every backdated expense report, every subtle threat, it all went into a secure, encrypted file, each entry time-stamped and cross-referenced. My silence was not a shield. It was a carefully constructed net. Helene's power, or her perceived power, came from her manufactured intimacy with the university's leadership. She was constantly boasting of it. "Oh, President Davies and I were just saying," she'd begin, "we simply must get new linens for the faculty club." She'd imply that she and the president were partners, when in reality, he was just a man terrified of offending his most effective fundraiser. She used this perceived power to undermine me in small, corrosive ways. She'd suggest I was bogging down her team with pointless new rules at open faculty meetings. She'd link my name to the most frustrating, mundane aspects of the bureaucracy. "I'm so sorry about the new travel reimbursement forms," she'd sigh to a department head, loud enough for me to hear. "You'll have to take that up with Mara. She insists on every single receipt." I was the scapegoat for every necessary rule, painted as the petty, power-hungry obstructionist while she played the visionary. And my father? God help him. He bought it all. He began to internalize her language, to see me through her lens. His validation became her weapon. "Don't embarrass the school, Mara," he'd hiss at me when I'd try to speak to him privately about a compliance issue. "Helene is bringing in tens of millions of dollars. Your job is to support that, not to audit it to death. Don't make waves." He was more concerned with the appearance of impropriety than the fact of it. He was protecting his wife's reputation, which had become synonymous with his own social standing. As I walked into the lobby of my apartment building, I mentally pulled up the map. I had been drawing it in my head for 3 years. It was not a family tree. It was an organizational chart of power, a schematic of vulnerabilities. It started with Helene. From her position, A thick, pulsating arrow pointed to the Office of Fundraising, which she controlled not by title, but by sheer force of personality and implied threats. From fundraising, another arrow pointed to the major donors, the trustees, the alumni, the corporate partners. This was her fortress. The donors had a direct, unfiltered line to the president's office and the board of trustees. Helene's entire strategy was built on this one pillar. She was the key to the donors, and therefore, the president and the board would never, ever cross her. They couldn't afford to. And then there was my department, a small, isolated box, organizationally separate. I reported dually to the university's general counsel for operations. But, and this was the part she always forgot, I also reported directly to the board's independent audit and ethics committee. Helene saw power in people, in relationships, in handshakes and whispered promises. I saw power in systems, in bylaws, in contracts. Every single arrow on her map, every connection she had spent years cultivating, had a structural weakness. That relationship with the major donors? It was governed by the university's donor intent policy and gift acceptance guidelines, policies I had rewritten and the board had approved. Her control of the fundraising office? It was governed by IRS nonprofit regulations and our own internal financial controls, which required a separation of duties she constantly violated. Her perceived invincibility with the president? It was governed by the university's bylaws and, most beautifully, by the morals clause in her own senior-level employment contract. Every single node of her power was vulnerable, not to opinion, not to family drama, but to cold, hard documentation, policies, board minutes, expense ledgers, email metadata. She operated in the gray world of influence. I operated in the black and white world of evidence. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped into the darkness. The throbbing in my cheek was a steady drumbeat. 8:19 p.m. Table 14. North-facing camera. Helene had just made a fatal, arrogant mistake. She believed the fight was about her reputation, about my jealousy, about our family. She thought she could silence me with the same crude, physical intimidation she probably used on others. She was wrong. This was never a family dispute. It was a compliance investigation, and she had just, on camera, in a public forum, physically assaulted the university's chief compliance and ethics officer. She had handed me the one thing I was missing, an undeniable, non-negotiable, documented for cause breach. The perfect family front was a lie, a stage set, and she had just doused it in gasoline and lit the match, all while I was standing by, holding the fire extinguisher. The incident report forms, and the master key to every locked door in the building. I stood in my silent apartment, the receipt from Kingfisher Row, a small, powerful rectangle in my coat pocket. It was time to pull the alarm. I didn't turn on the lights. My apartment, with its clean lines and minimalist furniture, was cast in the cool blue glow of the city lights filtering through the large windows. I walked to the kitchen, took a bag of frozen peas from the freezer, wrapped it in a clean dish towel, and pressed it gently to my cheek. The cold was a sharp, grounding shock, a counterpoint to the deep, pulsing heat of the injury. I stood there in the semi-darkness, not as Mara Quinn the daughter, but as Mara Quinn the officer of the university, reviewing the facts of the case. The institution that employs both Helene and me, Evermere University, is not a public entity. It is a private, prestigious, and perpetually hungry beast. Its Gothic stone buildings and manicured lawns are not maintained by tuition alone, but by a constant, torrential inflow of private donations, corporate partnerships, and community service contracts. The university's budget, its reputation, its very future, is inextricably tied to the perception of its prestige and the generosity of its benefactors. It is a kingdom built on influence and image. Helene's role, Director of Community and Donor Relations, placed her at the very heart of that kingdom. She was the gatekeeper. Her job description was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, fostering strategic philanthropic relationships, cultivating community engagement, managing high-level donor stewardship. In practice, she managed the money and the people who gave it. She planned the galas, negotiated the naming rights for new buildings, and ensured that the university's wealthiest and most powerful patrons felt cherished, heard, and essential. She was the architect of the university's public face, and in her mind, that made her untouchable. My role is the antithesis of hers. As Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer, I am the architect of the university's conscience, its legal spine. My responsibilities are not measured in dollars raised but in risks mitigated. I don't manage relationships, I scrutinize them. My purview is a dense alphabet soup of federal and state regulations that she and her team routinely dismiss as red tape. The Clary Act, which mandates the reporting of campus crime statistics, Title IX, which governs gender discrimination and sexual misconduct, FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which protects student data with the ferocity of a dragon. My office handles everything from anonymous whistleblower reports and conflict of interest disclosures to ensuring that every seven-figure donation is used for its explicitly stated purpose and not diverted to fund a donor's vanity project. I am the university's designated skeptic, the one paid to ask, is this legal? Is this ethical? Can this be documented? At an institution like Evermere, there are clear, uncrossable lines, the red lines that separate fundraising from bribery, relationships from coercion, and institutional advancement from institutional liability. These lines are codified in the faculty and staff handbooks, in employment contracts, and in board-approved policies. You will not leverage your position for personal gain. You will not use university resources to intimidate or threaten another employee. You will not, under any circumstances, retaliate against any individual for raising an ethical concern or participating in an investigation. These are not suggestions. They are the load-bearing walls of the entire structure. Helene had been leaning on those walls for years. Tonight, she had taken a sledgehammer to one of them. This did not begin with a punch. It began 3 months ago with a quiet tip to our anonymous reporting hotline. The report was from a junior faculty member, his voice digitally disguised, alleging that Helene was selling access to our students. Specifically, he claimed that a major donor, a private equity firm, was being promised exclusive recruitment seminars and access to a curated list of top-performing business students in exchange for funding a new wing of the library. This was a flagrant violation of FERPA and our own equal opportunity policies. It was a classic quid pro quo, trading the privacy and prospects of our students for a check. The investigation was delicate. It was all circumstantial, emails with suggestive language, calendar entries that didn't quite add up. I had a strong suspicion, but no smoking gun. 2 weeks ago, I made a strategic move. I compiled a preliminary file and, following protocol, issued a formal letter of inquiry to Helene. It was a low-level intervention, a warning shot. It didn't accuse her of anything directly. It simply outlined the relevant policies on donor-student interaction and requested clarification on her recent meetings with the firm in question. It was a standard procedural step. I sent it via internal courier, requiring her signature upon receipt to establish a documented chain of custody. Her response was not professional. It was primal. She didn't reply to the email. Instead, starting that night, she began calling my personal cell phone from a blocked number. The first call came at 11:47 p.m. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was low, slurring slightly with wine and rage. You think you can come after me in my own house? At my own job? You are a pathetic, jealous child. Bury this, Mara. Bury it now, or you will regret ever thinking you could touch me. There were 2 more calls over the next few days, each one more unhinged than the last. I saved the audio files. I documented the date and time of each call. This was retaliation. It was a separate, and in many ways more serious, violation. It was an attempt to obstruct an official ethics inquiry through intimidation. But it was still my word against hers. She could claim it wasn't her. She could claim she was drunk, that she didn't mean it. It was a strong piece of evidence, but it was not airtight. The punch at Kingfisher Row changed the entire calculus. The assault, witnessed and recorded, transformed the case. It was no longer a quiet, internal inquiry into a potential policy breach. It was now a documented, violent, and retaliatory act committed by a senior university official against the very person charged with investigating her. It was the link, the nexus, the act that connected all the disparate pieces of evidence into a single, undeniable narrative of escalating misconduct, the suspicion of influence peddling, the evidence of intimidation, and now, the proof of physical assault. She had created her own case file against herself. Because of Helene's position, her access to high-level donors, her control over significant university funds, her public profile, she is classified as high-sensitivity personnel. This is a designation reserved for a handful of senior administrators whose actions could pose a significant and immediate risk to the university's finances and reputation. For individuals with this designation, a standard internal HR review is insufficient, especially when the complaint involves another senior officer. The potential for a conflict of interest, or the appearance of one, is too great. Our bylaws, which I helped redraft last year, are explicit on this point. Any formal complaint of this nature against high-sensitivity personnel automatically triggers a mandatory, non-negotiable external investigation protocol. The case is immediately handed over to the university's outside counsel and a pre-approved third-party investigative firm to ensure complete impartiality. The Internal Compliance Office, my office, transitions from leading the investigation to acting as the primary witness and custodian of the evidence. I had known for months that a confrontation was inevitable. I had anticipated it, planned for it. On my secure server, locked in a folder accessible only by me and the chair of the board's ethics committee, is a document I created 6 months ago. The file is named Playbook Contingency HW. It is a detailed, step-by-step, 72-hour action plan, designed to be executed the moment Helene Ward crossed a line from which there was no return. The playbook outlines every necessary step: the immediate preservation of all digital and physical evidence, the protocols for establishing a secure chain of custody, the precise language to be used in the initial notifications to the university president, the general counsel, and the board, the checklist for triggering a litigation hold on her email accounts, the contact information for the external investigators. Tonight's dinner was never a reconciliation. For me, it was a deposition under hostile circumstances. I had gone there prepared for a verbal assault, for more threats, for more manipulation. I went there to listen, to observe, to document. I did not anticipate she would be so foolish, so arrogant, as to provide me with physical evidence of her own self-destruction. She thought she was ending an argument. She thought she was putting me in my place. What she actually did was press the start button on my playbook. I took a final, deep breath, the cold from the peas numbing the skin on my cheek. I tossed the makeshift ice pack into the sink, walked into my home office, and turned on my computer. It was 9:02 p.m. The 72-hour clock had begun. The second I stepped out of Kingfisher Row, the performance of the calm victim ended, and the work of the incident commander began. I didn't go to my car. I turned right and walked 50 feet to the public restroom pavilion that served the upscale shopping complex. The lighting inside was fluorescent, bright, and merciless, far better for documentation than the restaurant's amber glow. I locked myself in a stall. My hands were perfectly steady. I pulled out my phone. I did not open the standard camera app. I opened the encrypted forensics app my office uses, the one that watermarks every image with an unalterable timestamp and GPS coordinate. I angled the phone and took 3 photos of my face. The first, a direct shot, captured the swelling and the distinct, angry abrasion from her rings. The second, a close-up of the split skin. The third, I held up the Kingfisher Row receipt next to my injury, the QR code, and the restaurant's name clearly visible beside the fresh bruise. The metadata would link the injury, the time, and the location access key in a single, self-validating file. I hit save. The app immediately processed the images and generated a unique cryptographic signature for each, a SHA-256 hash. This was the digital fingerprint. From this moment forward, any modification to these images, down to a single pixel, would be detectable. The evidence was pristine. I stepped out of the stall and leaned against the cold tile wall. 8:29 p.m. I accessed my university contacts and pressed the speed dial for the Evermere Ethics and Concern hotline. It didn't ring to a campus office. It rang to a secure third-party call center in another state, a service I had implemented to ensure impartiality and shield whistleblowers. A flat professional voice answered. Evermere Ethics, this is Agent 42. This call is being recorded. Do you wish to remain anonymous? Negative, I said, my voice clear and formal. This is Mara Quinn, Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer. I am reporting a code of conduct violation involving a senior administrator. I am the victim. The agent's typing was a fast, staccato sound in the earpiece. Please state the nature of the incident, the date, time, and location. Date: October 19th, 2025. Time of incident: approximately 8:19 p.m. Location: Kingfisher Row Restaurant, Briar Hollow. Nature: physical assault and battery committed by Helene Ward, Director of Community and Donor Relations. The assault was an act of retaliation for a pending ethics inquiry. File number INQ 2025-088. Understood. Ms. Quinn, I am creating a new case file. Are you in a safe location? I am secure, I said. The incident was captured on the establishment's internal security camera. Table 14, north facing. I have photographic evidence of my injuries. Timestamped. I have the receipt from the establishment which contains the access key for the footage. I am also uploading audio files from my personal device documenting prior threats from Ms. Ward related to the same inquiry. Acknowledged, the agent said. The system has generated a new case number for this matter. It is case E2147. All evidence you submit will be appended to this file. Is there anything further? Yes. Please flag this case with a mandatory, high-priority retaliation risk marker. The subject is high-sensitivity personnel with significant institutional influence. This report must be escalated to the External Review Board and outside counsel immediately, as per the protocol for high-sensitivity personnel conflicts. Flagging case E2147 as high-priority retaliation risk. The notification has been triggered. You will receive an email confirmation momentarily. Thank you, Ms. Quinn. The call ended. 8:31 p.m. The trap was now official. Case E2147 was live, logged by an impartial third party, and already outside my internal jurisdiction, just as the playbook required. My phone buzzed with the automated email confirmation. I immediately forwarded it. My fingers flew across the screen, composing a new concise email. The toe field was critical. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the retired federal judge who served as the independent chair of the board's Audit and Ethics Committee, and an email group labeled External Counsel Urgent. Subject: Urgent and Privileged. Case E2147. Notification: M. Quinn. Body: this communication is protected by attorney-client privilege. Dr. Vance, Counsel. This evening, at 8:19 p.m., I was physically assaulted by Director Helene Ward. This act was in direct retaliation for INQ 2025-088. The incident occurred at a public restaurant and was captured on video. I have initiated a formal report via the ethics hotline. Case E20147 attached. Attached to this email for your immediate review. Case E2I147 intake report. Third party. Geotagged location log from my investigation app. Scanned copy of the restaurant receipt. Timestamped 8:23 p.m. Containing the footage access QR code. The evidence is secure. As per university protocol for high-sensitivity personnel conflicts, I am recusing myself from the investigation and transitioning to the role of complainant and custodian of evidence. I am available to provide my full report to the designated external investigator. Mara Quinn, Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer. I hit send. 8:35 p.m. The leadership was notified. The legal shield was up. Next, the video. I pulled up the Kingfisher Row receipt and scanned the QR code. It opened a simple, secure web portal, the one I had recommended to their IT vendor. Customer record request. I entered my table number, the amount of the check, and my email address in the reason for request box. I typed, requesting a 30-day preservation hold and an expedited copy of footage from camera N4, table 14, from 8 o'clock p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on 10/19/2025, for a legal and university security matter. I hit submit. 30 seconds later, a new email arrived. Automated response. Thank you for your request. Your footage has been flagged for a 30-day legal hold. A manager will review your request for a copy within 1 business day. Your confirmation ID is KFR992B. Perfect. The footage was now legally frozen. They could not delete it. Now to populate the case file. I opened my secure investigation app on my phone. Case E21147 was already waiting for me, populated by the hotline. I tapped Upload Evidence. First, the 3 photos from the restroom, each with its SCA-256 hash automatically logged. Second, the audio files. I selected the 2 voicemail recordings from my phone's secure folder, the ones my home ring camera had inadvertently and beautifully recorded from my kitchen counter as my phone played them on speaker 2 weeks ago. The video file clearly showed my phone, the date, and the blocked number, all while Helene's voice echoed in the room. It was irrefutable proof she had made the threatening calls. Third, the PDF of the initial letter of inquiry, INQ 2025, that I had sent her. Fourth, the signed receipt acknowledging she had received it. I watched the progress bars turn green. Upload complete. I stood back, my mind racing, collating the timeline. It was a prosecutor's dream. 8:19 p.m. Helene Ward commits physical assault, witnessed by camera. 8:23 p.m. Mara Quinn secures payment receipt, establishing presence and the key to the video evidence. 8:30 p.m. Mara Quinn takes time-stamped photos of injuries, creating a verifiable record of damages. 8:31 p.m. Mara Quinn makes a formal or recorded call to the third-party hotline, officially creating Case E21147 and establishing the legal basis for the complaint, retaliation. 8:35 p.m. Mara Quinn notifies the board's ethics chair and outside counsel, executing the mandatory escalation protocol and establishing attorney-client privilege over the matter. 8:37 p.m. Mara Quinn triggers the legal hold on the primary video evidence at Kingfisher Row. 8:40 p.m. Mara Quinn uploads all corroborating evidence, prior threats, related inquiry, into the secure case file. In 21 minutes, I had built an ironclad, documented, and fully admissible case from the ground up. Every piece of data was locked in a digital vault, its chain of custody perfect and unbroken. The log was already populated in the app's backend. Item 001, photo, acquired by M. Quinn, 10/19/2030, uploaded to case E21147, 10/19/2040, purpose, document injury, and on, a beautiful, clean, undeniable ledger of facts. My final step for the night was to set the wheels in motion for tomorrow. I opened my calendar. I created a new event for 8 o'clock a.m. Title, Urgent and Non-Cancelable. Case E21147, briefing. I invited the 2 partners from the external investigative firm we kept on retainer. I attached no documents. They would already have been contacted by outside counsel. They knew the protocol. The meeting was set. The 72-hour playbook was now the 12-hour sprint. I finally left the restroom and walked out into the cold night air. I walked home. My cheek throbbed, a dull ache that felt like a victory. Inside my apartment, I sat on my sofa in the dark. I pulled out my phone one last time. My father had called twice. Helene had called 3 times. There was a string of increasingly frantic texts from her. Where are you? Your father is worried. You can't just run off. Mara, pick up the phone. We need to talk about this. You misunderstood. I ignored them. I opened a new text message. I typed her name. My message was only one sentence. It was the last communication I would ever have with her directly. Helene, for my safety and legal protection, all future communication from you or my father must be directed to the university's external counsel. Do not contact me again. I hit send. Then I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number. I activated the Do Not Disturb mode on my phone, setting it to allow calls only from the ethics chair and outside counsel. The trap was set. The doors were locked. The process was in motion. The assault at Kingfisher Row was not the disease. It was merely the symptom that had finally become visible to the naked eye. It was the loud, violent event that would force everyone to look at the quiet, systemic sickness I had been tracking for 3 years. Helene operated under the illusion that power was a shield, that her relationships and her fundraising totals made her invulnerable. She failed to understand that at an institution like Evermere, true, lasting power isn't in a person, it's in the process, it's in the bylaws, it's in the code of conduct she had signed but never bothered to read. My job is to be the memory of that code. In my home office, bathed in the cool light of my monitor, I opened the archive. It was a secure, multi-encrypted container on a partitioned drive. A digital vault I referred to only in my own notes as the ledger. It was not a chaotic collection of grievances. It was a series of 7 distinct, meticulously curated case files, each one a self-contained story of a single transgression. Each file was named, numbered, and cross-referenced with the specific university policy it violated. Tonight, for the first time, I was moving them from the monitoring stage to active evidence. Case E20147 was the master key, and these were the locked rooms it would open. I started with the first file, the one that began it all. File HG01, the Ashton Proposal, Violation Policy 4.1.7, Donor Influence and Academic Integrity, 20 U.S. Code FERWA1232G, FERPA. This file contained a single, damning email chain. The primary message was from Helene to the Dean of the School of Engineering, sent from her Evermere account. It was written in her signature breezy, authoritative tone. Darling, it began. A quick heads up. I had a phenomenal lunch with Marcus Ashton Robotics, and he's this close to committing to the full $5 million for the new innovation lab. He's a wonderful man. So committed to our students. He has one small, informal request. His team would love a first look at our top 20 graduating seniors in mechatronics and AI, just resumes and transcripts, nothing too formal, before the general career fair. Let's make that happen for him. This is the kind of partnership that builds futures. The dean, a cautious man, had replied, Helene, you know we can't release student records without consent. FERPA is quite clear. Helene's response was swift and dismissive. Don't be so literal. This isn't an official release. It's a strategic introduction. Frame it as a special recruitment opportunity for the students. It's a win-win. Don't let paperwork get in the way of a $5 million win. The dean had never replied. Instead, 2 days later, a copy of the email chain appeared in my anonymous tip box. Helene was not just violating federal law. She was attempting to create a tiered system of access, turning our students into commodities to be traded for donations. She was selling their futures to the highest bidder. File HBU02, the Gala Kitchen, Violation Policy 7.2, Misappropriation of University Funds. This one was about greed, small and ugly. During a routine audit of the previous year's Light the Commons Gala, the same event scheduled for tomorrow, I noticed a peculiar line item in Helene's budget. Under event supplies, there was a $4,800 charge from a high-end kitchen supply store, coded to the gala's project number, but the gala was fully catered. The university doesn't own its own event cutlery. I pulled the invoice. The charge was for a set of German knives, an Italian espresso machine, and a set of copper-bottomed pans. On a hunch, I cross-referenced the delivery address on the invoice. It wasn't the university. It was my father's home address. She had used donor funds, money given in good faith to support the university's mission, to remodel her personal kitchen. She had hidden it in plain sight, buried in a $500,000 event budget, assuming no one would ever bother to look at the details. But looking at the details is my entire job. File HB003, the PR contract, violation policy, 3.5, procurement and conflict of interest. This file was a single screenshot of a text message conversation, sent to me by a local marketing consultant who had lost a university contract. The conversation was between Helene and the owner of the firm that had won the bid. Helene, the contract is yours. Congrats. Vendor. Thank you. Helene, we won't let you down. We're so excited to support Evermere. Helene. I know, and I'm excited for you to support the new Helene Ward Leadership Scholarship. A check for the first $10,000 installment will be a wonderful way to kick off our partnership. It was classic pay-to-play. She had awarded a lucrative university contract not based on merit or cost, but in exchange for a kickback disguised as a donation to a vanity scholarship in her own name. She had corrupted the university's procurement process for her own ego. File HWW04, the Crying Assistant, Violation Policy 2.9, Whistleblower Protection and Anti-Retaliation. A year and a half ago, a young administrative assistant in the fundraising office filed a formal complaint with HR. She alleged that Helene was forcing her and other junior staff to work unpaid hours at off-campus donor events, classifying them as volunteer opportunities to bypass overtime laws. It was a clear labor violation. I was CC'd on the initial filing. 1 week later, the assistant formally withdrew her complaint. The withdrawal letter was stilted, professional. Upon further reflection, it read, I believe I misunderstood the nature of my duties. But the day before she withdrew, the assistant had come to my office, without an appointment, and cried for 30 minutes. She told me Helene had called her into her office, closed the door, and told her that proceeding with the complaint would not only end her career at Evermere, but that Helene would personally ensure she never worked in fundraising in this state again. Helene had then reminded her that we are a family here at Evermere, and that making trouble for the family is a terrible way to start a career. The young woman was terrified. She couldn't afford to lose her job, let alone be blacklisted. She withdrew the complaint. I took a formal, signed statement of her account of that meeting and sealed it. It was the first documented evidence of Helene's pattern of using threats and intimidation to silence dissent. It was a perfect predicate for the events of tonight. File HB005. The Digital Signature, Violation Policy, 6.4, Appropriate Use of University Assets. This was a short, nasty email. Helene had sent from her university account to a tenured professor who had publicly questioned the allocation of funds for a new athletics facility Helene was championing. The professor argued the money should go to the humanities department. Helene's email was not a professional disagreement. It was a threat. I have a very long memory, she wrote. The next time your department comes to the board asking for funding, I will remember your profound lack of support for the university's strategic vision. The professor, a man in his late 60s with unimpeachable integrity, did not respond. He forwarded it directly to me with a single question. Is this appropriate? It was not. It was an abuse of her position and a misuse of university systems for personal intimidation. And because she had sent it from her university-issued computer, logged into her authenticated account, the email carried a DKIM signature in its metadata, a cryptographic key that proved, with mathematical certainty, that it had originated from her, at her desk, on a specific Tuesday afternoon. It was a digital fingerprint she could not deny. File HWZ06 and HOJ07, The Florida Deception and the Phantom Volunteers, Violation Policy 7.1, Business Travel and Expense, Policy 8.3, Accurate Reporting to Granting Bodies. These two files were linked. File HW006 contained a photograph, anonymously emailed to my office, of Helene and a major real estate developer donor, laughing on a golf course at a luxury resort in Florida. The donor had his arm around her. Both were holding cocktails. The problem? Her official university calendar and her subsequent expense report stated she was in Florida for a 2-day solo site survey of a potential satellite campus location. The resort was 200 miles from the proposed site. She had used university funds for a romantic getaway. File HW007 explained why that donor was so important. His company's charitable foundation had given Evermere a massive grant for community outreach. The grant required the university to log 5,000 hours of student volunteer work per year. For 2 years. Helene's department had submitted glowing reports, complete with student names and hours logged. But when I spot audited the logs, I found anomalies. Dozens of students had supposedly logged hours on days they were registered for exams, or even on days the university was officially closed for holidays. The logs were a fiction, a complex and fraudulent scheme to satisfy the terms of a grant, all while the director responsible was on the golf course with the man who had given it. 7 files, 7 stories. Each one was a thread in the web of corruption she had woven around herself. Each piece of evidence was tied, not to my opinion or my feelings, but to the cold, hard text of a policy she had agreed to uphold. There was no room for misunderstanding. There was no gray area to hide in. I was not seeking revenge. Revenge is an emotional, messy act. This was an audit. I didn't want her money. I didn't want an apology. I wanted the rules to win. I wanted the system, the one designed to protect the institution and all the people within it, to function exactly as it was designed, in a world, in a family, where I was constantly told that my adherence to rules made me weak and naive. I wanted to prove that the rules were the only thing that was truly strong. Tonight, with the irrefutable evidence of Case E2147 as the binding, I began to assemble the pieces. I opened a new folder on my desktop, the master file. I dragged file HW01 into it, then HW02. One by one. The quiet files joined the loud one, the whispers joining the scream. The picture was no longer a collection of fragments. It was complete. It was a portrait of a woman who believed she was above the policy, and I was about to prove that. Here, nothing is. My apartment was no longer a home. It was a command center. The 72-hour playbook was operational, and the first phase was the 12-hour evidence sprint. This was the work that happened in the dark, the meticulous, unglamorous assembly of the legal and procedural engine that would drive everything that came next. The throbbing in my cheek was a physical metronome, ticking down the seconds. At 9:10 p.m., I initiated the secure, encrypted video conference. 3 faces appeared on my screen, all of them sharp, professional, and expensive. Sarah Jenkins, the university's lead outside counsel, her expression already a mask of litigation-ready focus. Mark Ito, a forensic auditor from a third-party firm, his eyes quick and analytical, and Dr. Eleanor Vance, the board's ethics chair, observing from her home study, her presence a silent, powerful authorization. "Good evening," I began, my voice flat, all emotions surgically removed. "You have the initial report, Case E22147. We are now establishing the chain of custody for the primary evidence. Mark, I am transferring the digital assets to your secure portal now." "Receiving," Mark said, his own screen visible in a small window. "File 1, 2, and 3 are the photographs. Time-coded 2030. I'm running the hash verification." We sat in silence as he worked. This was the foundation. If the evidence could be challenged, if I had mishandled it in any way, the entire case would crack. "Hashes match the SHA-256 signatures generated by your device, Mara," Mark reported. "The images are clean, timestamps are locked, metadata is intact. Now, the audio files." "Uploading," I said. "This is the Ring camera footage from 2 weeks prior, capturing the audio of the retaliatory voicemails." We watched the small, grainy video of my own kitchen counter. We listened to Helene's voice, thick with rage, echoing in the room. "Bury this, Mara. You will regret ever thinking you could touch me." Audio is clear. Sarah, the lawyer, noted. The visual, your phone, the date on the screen, corroborates the source. Mark? It's clean, Mark confirmed. Uploading to the case file, E20147, item 004. Now, I said. The primary exhibit, the Kingfisher Row footage. At 2037, I triggered a legal hold via their public portal. Sarah, they will likely require a subpoena for the copy. Already handled, Sarah said, not looking up from her keyboard. I contacted their corporate counsel 10 minutes ago. They are a university vendor. They are being cooperative. I have a temporary admin login to their secure portal. Stand by. An email notification dinged in my inbox, a link and a 24-hour access key. I'm in, I said. Accessing camera N4. Pulling the file block from 2015 to 2025, the download bar crawled across my screen. It felt agonizingly slow. The file was 482 megabytes. Transferring to your portal. Mark, now. We all watched it together. It was high angle, black and white, silent, but it was devastatingly clear. We saw Helene lean in. We saw her hand, a pale blur, move from the table. We saw the impact, my head snapping back with the force of it. We saw the waiter, Leo, freeze. We saw me pause, tilt my head deliberately toward the camera, and then speak into my watch. Freeze frame at 20:19:05, Mark said. His voice clipped. Impact. Freeze frame at 20:19:08. Subject, Mara Quinn orients to camera. Freeze frame at 20:19:12. Subject Mara Quinn activates recording device. Clear, unambiguous, and unprovoked. Sarah stated, it wasn't a question. It was a legal conclusion. The video is verified, Mark said, finality in his voice. Hash generated, file ingested, and sealed. Case E20147, item 005. I have also logged the automated receipt from the restaurant's portal. The chain of custody is perfect. Dr. Vance, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Excellent work. Ms. Quinn, Sarah, Mr. Ito, you have your directive. Proceed with the full external investigation. Mara, you are now the complainant. You will hand over your remaining files. Yes, Dr. Vance, I said. I am uploading my Quiet Files archive to the portal now. 7 folders, cross-reference to the relevant university policies. Understood, Sarah said. We will take it from here. We will be in touch by 0800. The call ended. It was 1:00 a.m. Phase 1 was complete. But my night was not over. The external team was now running the investigation. I was running the containment. I opened a new document. Priority Interview Sequence, E20147. This was my recommendation to Sarah's team. My mind was sharp. The fatigue held at bay by a cold, precise anger. Leo, waiter. Kingfisher Row, non-university witness. Corroborate visual evidence. Establish public nature of the incident. David, restaurant manager. Kingfisher Row. Confirm data integrity. Confirm receipt of legal hold. Anna Rilke, former admin, assistant, fundraising, from file HW. 4. This was critical. Establish the pattern of threats and retaliation. She was scared. She would need to be handled by counsel, assured of protection. Michael Chenoweth, Finance Department, from file HW. Trace the payment for the kitchen supplies to the Gala project code. Establish misappropriation. Student A and Student B, from file HW. 7. The Phantom Volunteers. Confirm they never performed the hours Helene logged for the community grant. Establish fraud. I encrypted the file and sent it to Sarah. Recommendations was all I wrote in the subject line. Next, I opened a new email to the university's Chief Information Officer, CCing General Counsel Anya Sharma. Subject: Formal litigation hold. Do not delete. Case E2-147. Pursuant to University Policy 9.3, Preservation of Records, and in anticipation of formal litigation, you are hereby instructed to immediately place a legal preservation hold on all electronic data for the following custodians. Effective immediately, this includes, but is not limited to, all emails, active and deleted, calendar entries, cloud documents, drafts, and system logs. Data must not be altered or destroyed until further notice from the Office of General Counsel. I listed the names: Helene Ward, her primary assistant, the finance clerk. I hit send. It was 1:45 a.m. The digital net was now in place. Helene could no longer delete a single email, a single calendar entry, a single draft. She was electronically frozen. Now, the political and operational endgame. I drafted a new, precise memorandum to Dr. Eleanor Vance, Chair, Audit and Ethics Committee, from Mara Quinn, CCO. Date: October 20th, 2025, 02:30 a.m. Subject: Urgent recommendation, Case E2147, H. Ward. Dr. Vance, following the 01 a.m. forensic verification of evidence, the immediate risk profile for this case has escalated significantly. We have confirmed irrefutable evidence of physical assault and retaliation, Policy 2.9, misappropriation of university funds, Body 7.2, fraudulent reporting and grant non-compliance, Policy 8.3, pattern of intimidation and obstruction, by Committee 2.9. The cumulative risk, legal, financial, regulatory, and brand, is severe. The subject's continued access to university systems, donor relationships, and junior staff poses a direct threat to the integrity of the investigation and the university itself. Therefore, I formally recommend the immediate temporary administrative suspension of Helene Ward, with pay, effective 06:12 a.m. today, pending the outcome of the external investigation. I sent it, then I opened my calendar. I created a new, non-cancelable meeting for 7:45 a.m. Title: Urgent Directive, Personnel Matter. Attendees: Anya Sharma, General Counsel, and David Lee, Head of Human Resources. I CC'd Sarah, the outside counsel. The location was Anya's office, not mine. This was a university action, not a personal one. I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. and lay down on my office sofa. Fully clothed, I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind rehearsing the next 12 hours. My phone vibrated on the desk at 5:31 a.m. Just as I was standing up, it was an email from Dr. Vance. Ms. Quinn, your recommendation is approved. The president has been notified. Proceed. I immediately forwarded the approval email to Anya and David. I added one line. David, per this directive, please coordinate with campus security to have Ms. Ward's keycard and network access suspended effective 06:12 a.m. prior to her arrival to ensure data integrity. It was done. At 6:12 a.m., as the first gray light of dawn touched the city, Helene Ward's key to the kingdom would no longer work. I walked to my front door. I looked at the lock. My father had a key. I thought of his gray, pleading face at the restaurant. I thought of the 23 missed calls from his number that I had silenced. My final act of the sprint was personal, but no less procedural. I opened my phone and scheduled an emergency locksmith for 9:00 a.m. Reason: change all deadbolts, security compromise. Then I went to my phone's location settings. I created a new geofence alert. If my phone came within 100 meters of Helene's address, a pre-written message would be sent to my personal lawyer and to Sarah Jenkins. This was not paranoia. It was protocol for a documented retaliation risk. I stood in my kitchen and made coffee. My hands finally, almost imperceptibly, shaking, not from fear, but from the vibrating hum of the machinery I had just set in motion. I looked in the mirror. My cheek was a deep, ugly constellation of purple and black. It was the cost of activation. It was the physical receipt for the case. I took a sip of the hot black coffee. The gala started in 12 hours. The day of the Light the Commons gala dawned cold and aggressively bright. This was Helene's masterpiece, her annual coronation. The gala was the university's single most important fundraising event, a multi-million-dollar spectacle that she personally directed. From the ice sculptures to the seating chart, it was the night she lived for, a night where she could physically manifest her power, gliding among trustees and donors, basking in the applause she had orchestrated for herself. She believed this event made her essential. She believed it made her safe. My day started not with a ball gown, but in a stark, windowless conference room in the administration building, a place Helene probably didn't even know existed. At 8 a.m. sharp, the meeting convened. It was me, General Counsel Anya Sharma, Head of HR David Lee, and patched in via secure video, University President Davies and Dr. Vance. There were no pleasantries. I did not speak. Anya presented the findings from the 12-hour sprint, her voice a calm, legal monotone. She summarized the verified video evidence of the assault, the prior retaliatory threats, and the preliminary findings from the forensic auditor regarding file HW002, the kitchen supplies. President Davies, a man who usually operated in shades of polite indecision, was pale. His image flickered on the large screen. He looked at me. Just once. My bruised cheek was starkly visible, even in the bland lighting. I met his gaze without expression. The bruise was my affidavit. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice tight, "you concur with external counsel's recommendation?" "I do, Mr. President," Dr. Vance replied. "The risk of institutional liability is immediate and severe. The risk of investigation tampering is demonstrable. Administrative suspension is the only prudent course of action." Davies nodded, a single sharp jerk of his head. "Do it! By the book. No noise. Anya, David, handle it. I have to speak at this thing tonight. This cannot become a circus." The video feed clicked off. The meeting was over. 8:07 a.m. David Lee, the HR head, turned to his laptop. He was already typing. "I have the letter," he said. "Standard language. Pending a full investigation into serious allegations. Prohibited from campus. All university systems. I'll have it printed on official letterhead." Anya nodded. 9:15 a.m. Send the directive to campus security. Plain clothes. No sirens. No drama. 2 officers are to be assigned. Their instruction is to provide a polite, non-physical escort for Ms. Ward to a private room, where you will meet her, David. They are not to engage, only to be present. Is that clear? "Clear," David said. While they finalized the logistics of the execution, Sarah Jenkins' external team was already in motion. At 10:00 a.m., they interviewed Leo, the waiter, at a coffee shop far from campus. At 10:45 a.m., they had the restaurant manager on a recorded call, confirming the video chain of custody. At 11:30 a.m., they were in a secure room with Anna Rilke, the former assistant, who, upon being shown the signed affidavit from Dr. Vance promising full whistleblower protection, finally recounted the entire story of Helene's threats, this time for an official record. By 1:00 p.m., the forensic auditor had a signed statement from the finance department confirming the invoice for the kitchen supplies had been paid from the gala's restricted donor fund. The case was no longer just a single violent act. It was a fully realized, multi-count indictment. At 4:30 p.m., I stood in the cavernous, vaulted entryway of the Evermere Grand Hall. The place was a symphony of Helene's design. Towering floral arrangements of white orchids, waterfalls of blue light cascading down the limestone walls, the sound of a string quartet warming up in the mezzanine. Hundreds of guests in tuxedos and gowns were already arriving, checking their coats, their voices a low, wealthy murmur. I was not one of them. I was in my standard work uniform, a dark, severe suit, my hair pulled back. I stood against a far wall, 30 feet from the main stage, next to Anya Sharma. We were shadows in the wings of Helene's Grand Theater. In my hand, I held a single, thin, black leather portfolio. It contained only one document, a printed copy of the contact sheet for the external investigative team. It was a prop, a symbol of office. Then she arrived. Helene made an entrance, not just an arrival. She swept in through a side door, her coat already taken, wearing a custom-made gown of emerald green silk. Her hair and makeup were flawless. She was radiant, smiling, greeting a trustee with a warm, two-handed grip. She was the queen in her court, untouchable, her face a mask of perfect, gracious hospitality. She had not, I noted, attempted to contact me or my father since my single text message. She clearly believed she had weathered the storm, that my childish outburst would be forgotten, that I would shrink back into the shadows, defeated. She moved toward the staff check-in table near the stage, likely to give some last-minute imperious order. She smiled at the event staffer and swiped her faculty ID card through the reader to access the backstage area. The light on the reader blinked red. She frowned, a flicker of annoyance. She swiped it again, harder, with a sharp, percussive thwack. Red. Access denied. A small crease appeared between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. She looked at the staffer. "This ridiculous thing is broken. Get me a new one." "I'm sorry, Ms. Ward," the staffer, a young student, said, his voice trembling. It says your card is inactive." "What?" Her voice was no longer a warm purr. It was a cold snap. "That's absurd. Call it—" "There's no need for that, Helene." David Lee, the head of HR, stepped out from a curtained alcove just behind her. He was flanked, at a polite 5-foot distance, by 2 campus security officers in dark suits. They did not look at her. They looked at the space just over her shoulder. Helene's head snapped toward him. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of cold confusion. "David, what is this? I'm in the middle of my event. Get these men away from here." "Helene," David said, his voice quiet, kind, and utterly inflexible. "I need you to come with me. Please, we have a private room reserved. There is a personnel matter we must discuss." "A personnel matter? Now?" she hissed, her eyes darting to the guests, then to me. She saw me. She saw me standing next to Anya Sharma. She saw the portfolio in my hand. And in that instant, her face, so perfectly composed, completely unraveled, the color drained from it. The confusion hardened into a raw, dawning terror. She knew. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't. This is my event." "Please," David said, gesturing to the alcove. "Let's not do this here." But it was too late. The string quartet finished tuning, and a loud, bright fanfare erupted from the main speakers. The lights in the hall dimmed, and a single, brilliant white spotlight hit the podium on stage. The gala was beginning. The MC, a local news anchor Helene had personally booked, stepped up to the microphone. His voice boomed over the sound system. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 6th annual Light the Commons Gala." The room applauded. Helene was frozen, trapped between the HR director, the 2 officers, and the spotlight. "What a night we have for you," the MC continued. "But first, we must honor the woman who makes this magic happen every single year, the heart and soul of Evermere's community, our Director of Donor Relations, Ms. Helene Ward." The spotlight on the podium snapped off, and a new one flared to life, sweeping the entryway, searching for her. It found her. It illuminated her, standing there, her face a mask of horror, flanked by security and HR, cornered. The room, following the spotlight, turned to look. The applause, which had started enthusiastically, faltered, sputtered, and died. And into that sudden, vast, agonizing silence, a new voice cut through the PA system. It was not the MC, It was the calm, pre-recorded voice of the university provost. A slight change to our program before we begin. The president will now offer a special welcome. The spotlight abruptly snapped away from Helene, leaving her in the sudden, shocking darkness of the entryway. It recentered on the podium. President Davies walked out, his face grim, and stepped up to the microphone. The entire hall held its breath. It was as if 1,000 people had inhaled at once and forgotten how to let it out. Helene was just a silhouette, a shape in the dark. I could see her chest heaving. I stood by the wall, 30 feet away. I did not move. I watched the president clear his throat, and I felt my own heart. It was not racing. It was slow, steady, and calm. It beat in perfect time with the red indicator light on the stage's broadcast camera. 1, 2, 3. President Davies stood at the podium, a stark figure in the brilliant white light. He did not smile. He gripped the sides of the lectern, his knuckles white. The murmur in the grand hall had died into a thick, expectant silence. Every eye in the room, donors, trustees, faculty, my father, was fixed on him, but the collective consciousness was fixed on the shadowed entryway where Helene stood, trapped. "Good evening," the president began, his voice amplified, each word landing with the weight of a stone. "Welcome to Evermere. We gather tonight to celebrate our community and the bright future we are building together." He paused, letting the formal words hang in the air. However, in the spirit of the integrity and transparency that defines this institution, I must address a serious matter. A low, anxious sound rippled through the crowd. "Effective this afternoon," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the room but landing on no one. "A senior member of the gala's organizing committee has been placed on temporary administrative leave, pending the conclusion of an immediate and thorough internal investigation into allegations of serious misconduct." He did not say her name. He didn't have to. 1,000 heads turned in near-perfect unison, a slow, synchronous wave of curiosity and shock. They turned away from the stage and toward the dark entryway where the spotlight had, moments before, illuminated Helene's horror. She was no longer just a silhouette. She was the focal point of 1,000 invisible lasers of speculation and judgment. I could feel the force of their collective gaze from across the room. President Davies finished his remarks with a few more platitudes about process and integrity, then introduced the student choir. As the first notes of the alma mater swelled, it was the signal. The operation was now private. In the entryway, David Lee took a half step toward Helene. "This way, please," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. He gestured to a paneled door marked "Staff Only." One of the security officers moved smoothly to open it. For a moment, Helene did not move. She was paralyzed, her face a ghastly white in the dim light. Then her survival instincts kicked in. She looked at the door, then at the crowd, and a flash of her old, imperious anger returned. "This is a mistake," she whispered, her voice a ragged tear in the fabric of the music. "A misunderstanding." "We can discuss it in the conference room," David said gently. "Please." She saw she had no choice. To resist here would be to create the very scene the president had sought to avoid. She drew herself up, a queen being led to a dungeon, and walked stiffly through the staff door. The 2 security officers followed, then David Lee, then Anya Sharma, and finally, me. The door clicked shut behind us, and the sound of the choir was instantly muffled, distant. We were in a short, bland hallway. David led us to an adjacent room, a small, sterile space used for pre-event briefings. It contained a long table and a dozen chairs. It was lit by flat, unforgiving fluorescent panels. There was no art on the walls. It was a room with no personality, a room for delivering facts. Helene stood in the center of the room, her emerald gown a slash of vibrant color in the sterile environment. She turned to face David Lee, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a wave of pure, distilled fury. "What is the meaning of this?" she spat, her voice low and shaking. "This is insane. This is because of her." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes burning with a hatred so intense it was almost a physical force. "This is that little girl's conspiracy. You cannot be taking this seriously. She is a vindictive, jealous child who has always hated me." David Lee did not react. He calmly placed a single sealed envelope on the conference table. "This is not a conspiracy, Helene," he said, his voice maintaining its maddeningly placid tone. "This is standard procedure as mandated by Evermere University Policy 7.3 Section B regarding formal complaints lodged against high-sensitivity personnel." He used the policy number. It was a verbal kill shot. It took the matter out of the realm of emotion and family drama and placed it squarely in the cold, impersonal world of the bylaws she had ignored. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was momentarily silenced, disarmed by the language of process. This was my cue. I took 2 steps forward, stopping on the opposite side of the table from her. I placed my black leather portfolio down. I did not open it. "Helene," I said, my voice as calm and neutral as David's. "There is no conspiracy. There is only a record." I tapped the portfolio. "This is a copy of the chain of custody receipt for the evidence package submitted to external counsel at 010 a.m. this morning, the footage from the Kingfisher Row camera, your voicemails from 2 weeks ago, and your digitally signed emails have all been logged, hashed, and verified by a third-party forensic auditor." Her eyes widened, the last vestiges of her defiance crumbling. The mention of the camera, the specifics, hit her like a physical blow. "You," she began, her voice a choked whisper. And then she broke, with a guttural scream of pure rage. She lunged, not at David, not at Anya, but at me. She threw herself across the corner of the table, her hands clawing, her face contorted into a mask of raw fury. She never reached me. One of the security officers, the taller of the two, moved with an almost lazy speed. He did not touch her. He simply stepped forward and placed one large, steady hand on the back of an empty chair that stood between us, his arm forming an impassable barrier. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone, "please maintain a safe distance." Helene recoiled as if she'd hit a brick wall, stumbling back. She stood there, panting, her emerald gown now looking like a costume, her carefully constructed persona completely shattered. She was no longer the queen of the gala. She was just a cornered woman in a sterile room. Anya Sharma, the general counsel, stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. She began to read in a clear, dispassionate voice, as if she were reciting a grocery list. "Helene Ward, pursuant to your administrative suspension, you are being formally investigated for allegations including, but not limited to, violation of University Policy 2.9, retaliation against a reporting party, violation of University Policy 7.2, misappropriation of restricted university funds, violation of state and federal statutes regarding assault and battery, and gross misconduct constituting a breach of the morals clause of your employment contract." Helene stared at her, dumbfounded. It was too much, too fast. The sterile, legal language was a cage she couldn't break. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, for a way out. She saw the main door to the hallway open. President Davies stepped in, his face like granite. He must have finished his speech and come directly here. Her face lit up with a final, desperate surge of hope. "Arthur!" she cried, not using his title. "Mr. President, thank God. Tell them this is a mistake. You have to stop this. You know what I do for this university. I am protected by you. You protect me." President Davies looked at her, his eyes cold. He looked at the stark, ugly bruise on my cheek. He looked at the impassive faces of his HR head and his general counsel. His loyalty was not to her. It was to the entity, to the institution she had endangered. "I am not protecting you, Helene," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying the finality of a death sentence. "I am protecting the university." The hope in her eyes died, extinguished in an instant. It was over. The last pillar of her power had just crumbled into dust. David Lee pushed the envelope on the table a few inches toward her. "We need you to sign the acknowledgement of receipt. Helene, it just confirms you have received this letter of suspension." He held out a pen. She stared at the envelope as if it were a snake, for a long, silent minute. The only sound was her ragged breathing. Then, with a defeated, shuddering sigh, she snatched the pen. Her signature was a jagged, angry slash across the page. David took the form back. He nodded to one of the security officers. The officer spoke into his wrist communicator. "Subject has acknowledged. Deactivate permanently." Somewhere, in a server room across campus, a final line of code was executed. Helene Ward was now, officially, an outsider. David looked at her. "Your personal effects from your office will be inventoried and sent to your home. A member of my team will contact you tomorrow to arrange a time. You are not to return to campus or contact any university employee until this investigation is concluded. Do you understand?" She just nodded, staring at the blank wall behind him. "This way," David said. He walked to a door on the far side of the room, one I hadn't noticed before. He opened it. It did not lead back to the glittering grand hall. It opened into a long, bright, sterile service corridor. It was painted a stark, institutional white, lined with gray electrical conduits and fire extinguishers. It was the functional, ugly, unseen heart of the building. It was the way out for the trash, for the dirty laundry, for her. "A car is waiting for you at the service exit," David said. Helene walked toward the door like a sleepwalker. She paused on the threshold, her emerald gown looking garish and out of place under the harsh white light of the corridor. She looked back. Just once, her eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, only a hollow, echoing emptiness. Then she was gone. David Lee closed the door, and the click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The gala was a distant symphony, its music and laughter bleeding faintly through the soundproofed walls of the president's boardroom on the 4th floor. The party was for them, the donors and the trustees. This meeting was for the institution. It was the quiet, unglamorous, and absolutely final act. It began at 6:10 p.m. I stood at the head of a long, polished mahogany table that reflected the recessed ceiling lights like a dark, still lake. Seated around it were the 5 members of the board's Audit and Ethics Committee, chaired by Dr. Vance. President Davies was there, as was Anya Sharma, and at Dr. Vance's explicit request, one other man sat observing silently, Marcus Ashton, of Ashton Robotics, the $5 million donor from File HW's. 1. His presence was a strategic necessity, a living symbol of the interests Helene had claimed to serve and had ultimately betrayed. I did not present a narrative. I did not speak of family or betrayal. I presented data. "On the screen," I said, my voice even, "you will see the security footage from Kingfisher Row Restaurant, camera N4. The timestamp in the bottom left corner is synchronized with the university's atomic clock. Please note the time of the transaction on the receipt. Item 002 in your evidence package is 8:23 p.m. The initial email to Dr. Vance and Counsel, item 003, was sent at 8:35 p.m. I pressed a key on my laptop. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. The silent, black and white footage played. No one in the room moved. They watched my conversation with Helene. They saw her lean in. They saw the punch. The video had no audio, but the violence of the act was so clear, so unambiguous. That sound would have been a distraction. They saw my head snap back. They saw me pause, deliberately turn my face to the camera, and speak into my watch. The room was utterly silent, save for the low hum of the projector fan. I let the clip play to its end, showing me paying the bill and calmly walking out of the frame. I looked at Mark Ito, the forensic auditor, who was patched in via a secure video link on a separate monitor. "Mr. Ito," I said, "can you attest to the integrity of this exhibit?" Mark's face, impassive and professional, filled the screen. "I can," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. The video file, along with all other digital evidence submitted in Case E29147, was transferred via a secure portal. The cryptographic hashes match the source files exactly. There has been no alteration, no tampering, no degradation. The chain of custody is unbroken. The data integrity meets all forensic standards for legal admissibility. His words hung in the air, a final, unassailable seal on the evidence. There was no room for doubt, no crevice for a misunderstanding to hide in. Dr. Vance turned her gaze from the screen to Marcus Ashton. "Mr. Ashton," she said, her tone respectful but firm, "you are one of our most valued partners. Ms. Ward was your primary liaison. We felt it was imperative you be made aware of the nature of this situation." Marcus Ashton, a man used to commanding boardrooms, did not speak for a long time. He stared at the blank screen where the video had just played. He steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched for a full 20 seconds, a vast, empty space in the conversation. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried the immense weight of his influence. "Dr. Vance," he said slowly, "my firm's partnership is with Evermere University, not with any single employee. We donate to this institution because we believe in its mission and in its integrity." He paused, and his eyes briefly met mine. "We fully support the university taking whatever action is necessary to uphold its own stated policies." It was a quiet, corporate, and absolutely devastating sentence. It was the sound of the last pillar of Helene's power base turning to dust. She had built her kingdom on the belief that men like Marcus Ashton were loyal to her. She was wrong. They were loyal to the stability of their investment. President Davies cleared his throat. He looked down the long table at me. The anger from this morning had been replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Mara," he said, and my name sounded strange in this formal setting. "Given the personal nature of this initial event, the board wants to know, what do you want?" It was a test. He was offering me a chance for a personal victory, to name my price, to ask for a punishment that would satisfy a purely personal need for vengeance. The room was silent. All eyes were on me. I looked directly at the president. "I want what I have always wanted," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I want the policy to be enforced as written. I want the code of conduct, which every employee agrees to uphold as a condition of their employment, to be honored. The personal nature of the event is irrelevant. The professional breach is everything." A small, almost imperceptible nod from Dr. Vance. I had passed. "Then the decision of this committee is unanimous," she announced, her voice resonating with the full authority of the board. "The employment of Helene Ward is to be terminated, effective immediately. For cause, based on gross misconduct, there will be no severance." She continued, "Furthermore, in light of the evidence presented in files HW-01 through HW-07, this committee authorizes the external counsel to launch a full, expanded investigation into all donor contracts and community partnership agreements negotiated by Ms. Ward over the past 36 months. Mr. Ito's forensic auditing team will be given full authority to conduct a complete review of the fundraising department's finances." It was a clean cut, not just the removal of a single person, but the systematic excision of the sickness she had introduced into the system. David Lee, the head of HR, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke for the first time. "Dr. Vance, for the protection of all parties, we request that the name of the initial reporting party in the related inquiry, INQ 2925, be kept confidential as per our whistleblower policy." He was talking about me. He was following the protocol to protect the anonymous source who had first flagged the Ashton proposal. The system was working. It was protecting its own integrity. I just nodded once. I said nothing more. The meeting was adjourned. People began to gather their papers, their voices low. the tension in the room slowly dissipating. I remained standing at the head of the table. I felt a vibration in my suit pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a text from my father. It was the first communication he had sent since I blocked his calls last night. "Mara, where are you? The president said Helene is gone. Call me. We need to talk." I closed my eyes for a moment. Then, my thumbs moved across the screen. My reply swift and final. "I am safe. Everything is being handled according to university policy." I hit send. I did not say by the book. That was his phrase. His world of abstract ideas. My world was policy, concrete, actionable, and inescapable. 2 seconds later, my phone began to ring. The screen lit up with his name. Dad. I didn't answer. I silenced the call and let the phone continue to vibrate in my hand. A frantic, desperate pulse. I turned and looked at my reflection in the dark, polished glass of the boardroom window. The city lights twinkled far below. In the faint light, I could see my face, my expression calm, controlled, and I could see the bruise on my cheek, a deep, ugly shadow. A strange, quiet feeling washed over me. It was not triumph. It was not the giddy, vindictive pleasure of victory. It was a profound, almost solemn sense of rightness, of order restored. It was not because I had won. I hadn't. It was because the law had won. The policy had won. In a place where she had believed power came from personality and connections, the quiet, boring, unassailable power of the rules had proven to be absolute. I turned back to the table. I picked up my black leather portfolio. It felt lighter now. I carefully tucked the papers inside. I closed the cover and fastened the small, magnetic clasp. It made a soft, final click. It felt like a final stitch, closing a long and painful wound. The case was closed. I didn't go back to the grand hall. The sound of the orchestra, the clinking glasses, the manufactured laughter, it all belonged to a world I had just sealed off. I took a side staircase, one used by maintenance staff, and descended 4 flights in the quiet hum of the building's machinery. The stairs led out into a basement corridor that smelled of old paper and ozone. I followed the exit signs until I pushed open a heavy steel door and stepped out into the night. I was not on the manicured front lawn where the limousines were parked, but on a quiet, forgotten patch of grass behind the administration building. From here, I could see the gala through the massive arched windows of the hall. It was a silent movie of wealth and power, figures in black and jewels moving in a golden light, their mouths opening and closing without sound. The light spilled out across the lawn, shattering into 1,000 points of gold on my simple, practical black shoes. The night air was cold and clean, a welcome shock after the recycled atmosphere of the boardroom. It carried the scent of damp earth and turning leaves. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, letting the quiet of the night wash over me. The war was over. The command center was dismantled. I was just a woman, standing on the grass, in the shadow of a building full of people who had no idea what had just transpired in the rooms above them. My phone, which had been silent for over an hour, vibrated once in my pocket, a single, final notification. I pulled it out. The screen was bright in the darkness. It was a message from a secure, encrypted number I knew belonged to the board's private server. It was from Dr. Vance. The message was 2 words, followed by a perfunctory sign-off. "Termination executed. Thank you." It was the most efficient, impersonal, and deeply satisfying message I had ever received. It was not a message of condolence or congratulations. It was a statement of a task completed, a process concluded. I opened my own secure work log app, the digital diary of my professional life. I found the entry I had created less than 24 hours ago. The bold red letters stood out. Case E-147, active. I tapped the entry. My fingers moved across the small screen, adding a final note beneath the long, detailed log of the past day. 20:45 p.m. Board. Has voted for termination for cause. External investigation into department expanded. Matter is concluded. I then navigated to the status field and changed it from active to closed. The red letters turned a calm, neutral gray. I saved the entry. It was done. A gust of wind swept across the lawn, colder this time. It whispered through the old oak trees and brushed against my face. I raised a hand, my fingers tracing the edge of the bruise on my cheek. It was tender, the skin tight with swelling, but the deep, hot throb was gone. It was just an ache now, a fading echo of the impact. I noticed my hand was perfectly steady, the fine tremor, the hum of adrenaline that had been my constant companion for the last day, was gone. There was only a profound and immense stillness, inside and out. The heavy door I had come through opened again, its hinges groaning softly. A young man, a student by the look of him, stepped out. He was wearing the black uniform of the catering staff, his bow tie slightly askew. He was probably on his break, seeking a moment of quiet away from the chaos of the event. He saw me standing in the shadows and flinched, startled. "Oh, sorry," he mumbled. I didn't see anyone." He started to turn back, but then he hesitated. He looked at me more closely, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He knew who I was. My picture was in the staff directory, a bland, smiling photo that looked nothing like the woman standing before him. He took a half step toward me, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You're Ms. Quinn, from the ethics office, right?" I simply nodded, expecting him to hurry away, not wanting to be seen talking to the university's internal affairs officer. But he didn't move. He looked from my face to the glittering windows of the gala and back. I heard some of the staff talking," he said, his voice hesitant but sincere. "About Ms. Ward, that she's gone." I said nothing. I just waited. "I just wanted to say," he continued, finally meeting my eyes directly, "thank you for keeping our school safe." The words were so simple, so unexpected. They almost threw me off balance. He wasn't talking about physical safety. He was talking about something more fundamental, the safety to work without being exploited, the safety to learn without being sold, the safety of a system that is fair and just. He was thanking me for a victory he couldn't see, for a battle he didn't know had been fought. A small, tired smile touched my lips. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in days. "It wasn't me," I said, my voice soft. "It was the policy." He looked at me, a little confused, but he nodded. "Right. Well, thanks anyway." He gave me a small, shy smile of his own, and then slipped away, disappearing back into the darkness along the side of the building. I stood alone again, the students' words echoing in the quiet. In the distance, the bells of the old Briar Hollow Church began to toll the hour, each chime a deep, resonant note that seemed to measure the end of this long day. 1, 2, 3. I listened until the last bell faded into the night. There would be no more threatening phone calls. There would be no long, drawn-out war of attrition. There would be no petty acts of revenge. She was gone, excised from the system as cleanly and efficiently as a line of corrupt code. The resolution was not in her defeat, but in the reaffirmation of the structure she had tried to dismantle. The gala would continue. The donors would write their checks. The music would play. But the foundation of the institution was stronger tonight than it was yesterday. The quiet files were now part of the official record. The whispers were now sworn testimony. My final thought was not of her, or of my father, or of the bruise that was already beginning to heal. It was of the elegant, unassailable logic of the system I served. Here, policy stands above power. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country and share your thoughts on Mara's journey. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a like, and hitting that hype button to help this story reach more listeners just like you.